Compliments of the season to our viewers and welcome to the first edition of Newspaper Headlines for the week, reaching you from the studios of the Advent Cable Network Nigeria Television, ACNN TV. So many events happened at the weekend within and outside the country. Please stay with us as we take a look at the stories from some of the national dailies. I am Rachel Ibunu. I will take it here with the Blueprint newspaper from the lead story. It says, planned 17 trillion naira loan from pension funds. Don't touch our money, pensioners warn governors. The kickers say they can't be trusted. Governors bad debtors. This is coming from experts. Serap wants Buhari to stop states. See the details on page 6. And we have this picture. The first is that of Chief of Air Staff Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar left, receiving a souvenir from Air Officer Commanding Ground Training Command, Bauchi, Air Vice Marshal Idi Aminu, during the 2020 graduation of NAF Special Force Course 7 and Combat Search and Rescue Course 3 at the Regiment Training Center, Commando Village in Bauchi. This happened on Saturday. And the second picture is that of participants performing obstacle training during the exercise. Below the picture, coalition to federal government. Close northern borders to stop banditry. The kicker, it has never yielded desired results from Bagudu. And the story can be found on page 16. Now to the bottom strip stories. Kebbi, ministry's cash strapped. 4 commissioners may resign. See details on page 13. On page 5, end SARS. Kogi governor alerts on another protest. Cautions. Federal government begins payment of 30,000 naira grants to taxi, bus, Okada operators. Details on page 5. And on page 13, Jigawa Supervisory Councillor loses 2 kids in Inferno. And their soul rest in peace. And above the lead story, by elections, APC wins Lagos, Imo, Plateau senatorial seats. The kicker, PDP victorious in Cross River, loses Bauchi Assembly seat. Let's accept defeat, Bala tells party members. Story starts from the front page, it continues on page 6. Drama as 6-year-old girl rejects foster father. See details on page 9. Now beside the masthead, Jai's Bank's e-channel will make Hajj savings easier. This is coming from the managing director, and the story can be found on page 25. Now to the last story on Blueprint newspaper. Access Bank goes after Seblat over $85 billion debt. Story on page 24. We move to the Daily Times newspaper, and I'll take it from the top above the masthead. Obiozo declares bid to be Ohaneze Indigo's President General. The story starts from the front page, continues on page 5. Now the lead story. Lawmakers urge Buhari's impeachment. Details on page 2. We have the picture of Senate President Ahmed Lawan and the Speaker of House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila. The bottom strip stories on protest. Lagos police warn against public gatherings and protest. The story starts from the front page, continues on page 11. This is an editorial on police reforms. It says which direction. You want to know which direction, get the Daily Times newspaper. The story starts from the front page. It continues on page 3. Now to the last story, an interview. How Fidelity Bank improves efficiency expands market share. The story starts from the front page, continues on page 8. That is the last story on the Daily Times newspaper. We move to New Telegraph newspaper, and I'll take it from the lead story. It says APC, PDP hold sway in 11 states legislative polls. The kickers: APC wins in Lagos, Imo, Plateau, Borno, Kogi and Katsina. PDP dominates Bayelsa, Cross River, Enugu, loses Bauchi. Dixon, ex-bank manager, female professor wins Senate seats. And the last kicker here says widows win, take over seats in Enugu and Cross River. The story is on page 2. Below the picture, presidency, PDP unfit to ask for Buhari's resignation. Now to the kicker, reps, why we want president impeached. See details on page 3. And on page 8, low testosterone can harm lung function, according to research. We move above the lead story. Governor suspends chief of staff for spraying cash. Details on page 31. On page 20, Okonkwo, government's policy has impacted banking industry positively. That is on page 20. Emefiele, Nigeria must not depend on oil for revenue forex. See details on page 2. And on page 8, Kalu endorses Obiozor for Ohanaeze Ndigbo president. That is on page 8. Now, above the masthead, banks garner 28.8 trillion naira customer deposits in 9 months. We have the bank's deposits highest, with Access Bank having 5.26 trillion naira, and the lowest here is Unity Bank with 332.4 naira. The story starts from the front page, it continues on page 3. Now to the last story, an editorial. End SARS, CNN's report and canons of journalism. See the details on page 15. Alright, we go to This Day newspaper, and I'll take it from the top above the masthead. Apapa gridlock pushes cargo cost to Nigeria to $600 million monthly. Apapa gridlock pushes cargo cost to Nigeria to $600 million monthly. The kickers: haulage cost up 1,000%. Shipping firms diverting Nigeria-bound cargoes to Cotonou, Ivory Coast. Story starts from the front page, continues on page 9. On page 8, federal government assures operators on CBN's 250 billion naira gas intervention fund. Now below the masthead, Flour Mills appoints Boye Olusoya new CEO. Details on page 8. Down to the lead story. Buhari expresses excitement as APC sweeps by elections. Says party still choice of Nigerians. INEC regrets assaults on staff. The story starts from the front page, it continues on page 9. ASU seeks time to conclude consultations over strike. The kicker: federal government meets labor on petrol, electricity tariff hike today. Story starts from the front page, continues on page 9. And we have this picture tagged latest senator. Lagos East Senator-elect Mr. Tokunbo Abirun left and Governor Sanwo-Olu during the senator-elect's visit to the governor in Lagos. This happened yesterday. Now to the last story on this day newspaper. Insecurity. Buhari capable of discharging his functions, says Fayemi. Details on page 11. All right, we'll pause here to observe a short break. When we return, newspaper headline continues with more. Please stay tuned.
Marriage is the institution which God established. It is such an important institution that nobody should enter carelessly or unadvisedly.
Love is actually an act of our will, and so you must decide to love.
Fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. When we exhibit that in our marital relationship, then we see that couples or husbands and wives enjoy the marriage that God gave to them.
The importance of marriage counseling is that it teaches the intending couples, or even the couples who are already married, the principles, the biblical principles of marriage.
Thanks for staying tuned. Let's see what other newspapers have to say. We continue with Nigerian Tribune, and I'll take it above the masthead. Local government style of toll collection, major challenge to Nigeria's tax administration. This is coming from Federal Inland Revenue Service, and the story is on page 33. APC NEC. Governors in final push to consolidate grip on party organs. See details on page 35. Now below the masthead. Corporate governance critical to business stability. Corporate governance critical to business sustainability. This is coming from Okonkwo, Fidelity Bank Managing Director. And the story is on page 4. On page 31, Southwest governors deviating from Amotekun's blueprint. This is coming from OPC coordinator. On that same page 31, Serap asks Buhari to stop governors from borrowing 17 trillion naira from pension funds. The lead story, police warn. Another end-SARS protest not allowed. Fresh protest premature. This is coming from Kogi State Governor. And the details can be found on page 2. Beside the picture, Omotola Oyediran valued humanity, says Bishop Fakbe at outgoing service. The story starts from the front page. It continues on page 8. We have this picture from left Archbishop of Lagos Diocese, Anglican Communion, Bishop Olushino Fakbe, former Ogun State Governor, Chief Benga Daniel, the Akaribo of Remo Land, Oba Babatunde Ajayi, Ogun State Governor, Prince Dakbo Abiodun, and others at the Thanksgiving service for Reverend Mrs. Omotola Oyediran, held at Our Saviour's Anglican Church, Remo, Ogun State. This happened on Sunday. Below the picture, Abirun Dixon wins senatorial by-elections in Lagos and Bayelsa. The kickers, Plateau gets first female senator as APC wins. INEC declares Zamfara by-election inconclusive. The stories can be found on pages 34 and 35. Now to the last story on Nigerian Tribune. Bayelsa boat tragedy. Police recover 6 bodies. The story can be found on page 37. Alright, that is the last story on Nigerian Tribune. We move to People's Daily newspaper, and I'll take it below the masthead. Kano government demands apology from varsity over controversial Ganduje's appointment. The story can be found on page 2. Now to the lead story. By-election. APC wins in Bauchi, Katsina, as PDP protest in Zamfara. The kicker. INEC declares Zamfara by-election inconclusive. See details on page 5 and 10. Now below the picture, shipping. NNPC considers indigenous coins as Nigeria loses $1.9 billion annually. Details on page 19. Now to the bottom strip stories. 100 million naira not paid as ransom to release Chinese. This is coming from Chamber of Commerce, and the details can be found on page 5. On page 7, military kills several bandits, destroy camps in Kaduna. Details on page 7. 2023, APC mobilizer advocates youth presidency. APC mobilizer advocates youth presidency. That story is on page 4. And the last story on People's Daily says 4 perish in Casino Road accident. Details on page 3. We move to Nigerian Pilot newspaper, and I'll take it below the masthead. PDP clears senatorial seats in Bayelsa State. Details on page 8. And on page 9, Abia governor suspends chief of staff for spraying cash on pastor. Now on the lead story, stop governors, the kickers. Wild agitation greets governor's move to borrow 17 trillion naira pension funds. Serap writes Buhari to intervene, warns move dangerous. Says dipping hands into the fund will impoverish beneficiaries. Wants evidence of president's intervention within 14 days. Details on page 8. Now to the picture from left to right is that of President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, Senator Victor Nduma-Egba, and Senate leader Yahya Abdullahi during their condolence visit to Nduma-Egba at the weekend over his wife's death. May her soul rest in peace. Now below the picture, Lagos police threaten shutdown as youths plan fresh NSAS protest in Lagos. Details on page 7. Now the bottom strip stories. Buhari warns African leaders against violation of AFCTA rules. See details on page 8. Page 10. Military calls for a robust approach to tackle insecurity. Bayelsa by-election. Police confirm death of 6 officers in boat mishap. Details on page 7. And on that same page, Air Force graduates 203 Special Forces CSAR operatives to battle insurgents and bandits. Page 6. Maritime workers begin 3-day warning strike over Apapa gridlock. And to the last story on Nigerian pilots, we didn't endorse Tinubu's presidential ambition. This is coming from Kano Islamic leaders. Details on page 6. We move to Daily Champion newspaper, and I'll take it above the masthead. Buhari Sanwo-Olu celebrates as APC sweeps by election. The kickers coming from the presidency. Party wins 3 senatorial, 3 assembly seats. PDP wins 2 senatorial seats in Bayelsa and Cross River. See details on page 6. Ikpeazu suspends chief of staff for spraying money on cleric. See the story on page 7. And on page 6, Serap to Buhari, stop governors from borrowing 17 trillion naira from pension funds. The lead story, Lagos police threaten shutdown as youths plan fresh protest. Shelve your planned protest, Yaya Bello begs youths. See the details on page 6. Beside the picture, second term, CSO tags INEC chairman on electoral reforms ahead of 2023 polls. See the story on page 6. And on that same page, Mahama battles Akufo-Addo as Ghanaians elect president today. China offers comprehensive support to kickstart African free trade. See details on page 7. Now to the picture from right to left. That of Secretary to Lagos State Government, Mrs. Fola Shade, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Senator-elect Lagos East Senatorial District, Mr. Tokumbo, Commissioner for Local Government and Community Affairs, Dr. Wale Ahmed, and Member, House of Representatives, Ikorodu Federal Constituency, Honorable Jimmy Benson, during Abiro's visit to the governor at Lagos House, Marina, on Sunday. Below the picture, strike paralyzes socio-economic activities in Niger. This is coming from the commissioner, and details can be found on page 7. Now to the bottom strip stories on page 5. Kano Hibba Board arrested 2 prostitutes as 12 test positive to HIV. U.S. government removes visa. U.S. government removes visa fee for Nigerian travelers. See details on page 3. Now to the last story on Daily Champion newspaper. Ani sues for Yoruba unity as Ekiti Oba, Awori indigents visit Ile-Ife. Details can be found on page 6. Alright, that will be all for today's edition of Newspaper Headlines. Thank you for giving us audience. Do join us for a fresh edition on Wednesday. I leave you with these words before I leave. Sometimes the best thing to do is not to think, but to have faith that all will work out for the best. Have a productive week, remain blessed, and bye for now.
The word of God is God's instrument for deliverance. Bible said in Psalm chapter 107 verse 20 that
I would want to say
Worthy by design. On this show, we focus on the journey from girlhood to womanhood and everything in between. Worthy by design.
Beaming from the nation's capital, we bring to you the good news through